The revolt takes place in July, and how does a revolt take place? I don't know if any of you really know this. If you have the army behind you, you can always win a revolt. The way most revolts work, or at least in many countries, the army has army exercises, and it puts troops into the armories of a city, and they're engaged in exercises of one kind or another. The public doesn't know what the heck's going on. This is how they train their troops. In the case of a uprising or revolt, they put the troops into these armories, and at a given signal, the soldiers go out and they attack the public buildings, the parliament. They attack the telephone company, take it over. The newspapers, wherever they are individually, take them over. And when they have all of these things in control, there's nobody to fight them back, and bingo, you've got a victory for the revolt. In Spain, something unusual happened. They were, the people who had organized and won the elections in February had done so by being in touch with each other. You had the various political parties in touch with each other. You had unions in touch with each other, fraternal organizations, and so on. And they suspected something was going to happen, and they were prepared for it. And when the revolt breaks out, the electricians call the plumbers call the dry goods workers, you name it, whatever union, and it said, look, you go and protect the Parliament building. Get all your members and go to the Parliament building and stop the troops from taking it over. You printers, you go to the telephone building and stop the troops from taking it, or if they take it, attack the telephone building and get them the hell out of there. Get whatever guns you have at home, blunderbusses, hunting rifles, whatever the hell you have, and go out there and take it. And everybody goes, men and women. And you go even if you don't have any guns, and when somebody falls, you pick up that gun and you use it. And that's what happened. And literally, you know, try to imagine it, what a tremendous achievement it was for these people to, the revolt takes place in 15 of the major cities throughout Spain. And they are defeated in all but 3 of them. They are defeated in 12 of the big cities of Spain that they had attacked. And this is without an army and so on and so forth. Franco wins in 3 provinces close to Portugal. Portugal has sent some troops across to help him and eventually sent 10,000. But faced with this disaster, Franco calls Hitler. And it's at this point only that the world learns that not only was this junta acting alone, but they had made an agreement with Hitler and Mussolini for support. They didn't think they would need it to the extent that it finally wound up, but that's the way it worked. And he calls Hitler and he says, send transport planes to Morocco. Franco was telling this. They're there with the troops, the Moroccan troops that he had trained, and send transport planes and transfer them to Cadiz. We learned later that the reason that the Moroccans were willing to do this, the Moroccans hated the Spaniards who had occupied them, treated them as a colony, had forced them into the army, or coerced them, or the only way they could make a buck or make a living was to go into the army, but they hated all Spaniards. And he promised them that they could, any towns that they took, they could rape, kill, take property, do anything they pleased. And as long as they were killing Spaniards, they didn't care if they were fascist Spaniards or anti-fascist Spaniards. They went because of this particular law. Eventually, Portugal sent 10,000 troops, Italy sent 70,000 troops, and the Germans sent only 18,000. But those 18,000 were airmen and their planes, both bombers and fighter pilot planes, and the personnel to keep it afloat, to fix it when it came down, rearm it and so on, and the arms and ammunition to do that. He did the same thing with tanks and the same thing with artillery. And though their numbers were not as great as the Italians, they were more effective in terms of the fight against the Republic. With all of this, then, he goes and reconquers Spain. If you see the map of Spain after the revolt takes place and they fail in 12 of the major cities, the major part of Spain is held by the Republic. But with the preponderance of arms and ammunition that are being sent to his side, his army begins to slice through what is literally a pretty much defenseless country. Those who had put down the rebellion formed what they called militias. And there were, as George pointed out, anarchist militias, there were socialist militias, left Republican militias, and communist militias, and trade union militias, and pretty much operating independent of each other. How are you going to defend against an organized army that's attacking you, as I indicated, in your own country? They had to act, and they had to act fast. And what they did was, I mean, you have a short break-in period between July and the put down of the rebellion and the reattack against the Republic, which begins in September. That's a short period of time. But by September, the Moroccan troops were in the south, the Italians were sending troops, and the Portuguese, and the Carlists, and wherever Franco conquers any piece of the territory, he immediately drafts all young people from 17 up, puts them into the army, and puts his troops or others behind them, forcing them to fight, whether they wanted to or not. There were some, I presume, that were fascist-minded and probably volunteered or whatever, but the majority of those that he has fighting for him were drafted. And it's against this that you have a republic fighting. Now, if this had been a fight that had went on, whatever it resulted in, it would have been a blip in history, it would have been reported, and so on. What made it different was the fact that Hitler and Mussolini intervened. And they intervened at a time when fascism was on the rise, Japan in the Far East, Mussolini since 21, and Hitler since 1932, when he was given the premiership of Germany by Ribbentrop, who was then the president of Germany. Ribbentrop? No, I think it's a different name. So that what became obvious is this was a fight between the forces of appeasement, of those who were ready to appease fascism, and fighting, actually engaging in the fight against fascism. And when that became apparent, because the premier of Spain at that time, whose name was Caballero, he wanted to, what had happened is that a non-intervention committee had been sent up by Chamberlain, and under his leadership, they didn't want to get involved in the war in Spain, and their thinking was, as long as you could have the fascists fight the communists, they stood to gain no matter what the hell it was. So they didn't want to get involved in the war in Spain, and in effect, what that did was to stop the other democracies, including the United States, from selling arms to a fellow democracy.